Welcome, ladies, to another episode of the Fiercely Sassy Show. Today, I have a guest with us, Emma Tessler, who is here to talk about the process of hiring the right people at the right time. Is that correct, Emma?
Yes, I'm so excited to dive into this with you today.
All right, so why don't we get started with a little bit of background? Obviously, our audience doesn't know who you are yet, but we would love to learn a little bit more about you first.
My name is Emma Tessler. I am the founder of 95 Media. We are a digital marketing agency who works with scaling brands to help you grow your online presence and monetize your audience, because at the end of the day, there's a lot more to creating content than just getting up a post. We're really all about making sure that conversions are happening on social and you're growing your brand strategically along the way.
When you say strategically, what do you mean? Because we hear that as a buzzword a lot online. So what do you mean by that?
It feels like it's thrown around a lot. For us, strategy is really custom to everyone's brand. And I think that's something that gets a little lost in the process sometimes when we look at someone else and we see how they're doing something and we feel like, well, maybe if I just do it the exact same way, I can just kind of replicate results. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen that way a lot of the time. And creating a strategy that's custom to you is really important. In my opinion, the best way to do that would be we have our own process. It's called the 95 Media Method. It's a 4-part process and it starts with goals. So understanding your goals is the very first part. If you don't know where you're trying to go, you can't possibly build a strategy to help you get there. Number 2 is strategy. So that's building out that specific strategy for you. Number 3 is executing. So then putting that strategy in place, working towards those goals actively. And then number 4 is data and looking at the information coming in and saying, okay, what about the strategy is working? What may not be working so well? And how do we adjust moving forward? For us, strategy is really based on where is it that you want to go and what are those steps along the way that will help you get there.
Obviously, one of the things we want to touch on today is hiring, and I'm assuming this process fits into how you hire folks as well. Am I right?
Yeah, definitely. The method is more for, I would say, like marketing your brand, but it's definitely, when you're hiring, there's a lot of the same pieces that you look at.
Some women in our community are just starting out and they're not quite at that ready to outsource that process yet. But I know for myself, from my own experience, we did outsource pieces of our business and it didn't go well. It wasn't a great hire, wasn't a great fit for us. So I can vouch from that experience, and I don't want our women to go through that. What do you think the first piece, if it's a one-woman show, should really be outsourcing? And how do you find that person?
That's a great question. For everyone, I think it's a little different in terms of what is that first piece to outsource. A lot of people first make a virtual assistant hire. I've seen that to be the most common across the board because oftentimes we look at virtual assistant as like a one-stop shop. Oh, they can do it all. They might be very cheap because you're working with someone out of the country. And my opinion is to not do that, to be honest, because I believe in hiring people who are really great at what they do so that you avoid having those bad experiences. So instead of hiring a VA, a virtual assistant, to do, your marketing and to do maybe podcast production and to do your admin and to, make sure invoices are paid, like all those little things that a VA may be able to do, but aren't really an expert in any of them, I would recommend to do fractional hires who can support you in those different verticals, but are really specialized in doing those specific tasks. So, for us at 95 Media, we are the first hire for many of our clients who are solopreneurs. Maybe they have one other person working for them who's just like strictly executing client work alongside of the CEO. And then we are that first team hire, whether it might be marketing or sales, those kind of external hires that you bring in, we are typically the first that are brought in. When you bring in someone who's really good at marketing and they can help you market your brand better so that you are bringing in more leads, it actually helps you scale your business a lot faster than someone who may need to learn along the way and need a lot of training, if that makes sense.
From our experience, we definitely brought in somebody who had just gotten trained and was kind of learning along the job, and that was kind of the process, and it didn't go well, so I can understand what you mean. If you are bringing somebody in, so for instance, if you have a cousin or a friend's brother who can do parts of it, is that worth doing, or is that just a bad idea across the board?
Oftentimes it goes back to your budget. Sometimes we make those hires because it's a favor or they're a summer intern or it's someone $5 in the Philippines. For me, my recommendation would be if your budget allows you to hire someone who is specialized and doesn't need training, I would recommend going that route, because at the end of the day, you're likely hiring this person to save you time. And so when you have to put time into training that person, it almost negates the hire to begin with. So if you can look for someone who is trained in their craft and really has a process to onboard you as the client, and they can get the information they need from you rather than you saying, 3 months in, oh my God, I totally forgot to send you this really important file, this thing that you needed, or you're a week in, and then all of a sudden they're like, wait, I don't have the password to this. And someone who was really trained and had a very professional onboarding process would have known to get that information from you day one. And so that's a really big thing I've seen on our end, that our clients are never needing to say, okay, actually, you really need this or you really need that. It's very much like myself or my team saying, hey, here's everything we need up front. Make sure you pass that along, and then we'll let you know if we need something along the way. And I think that's a big differentiator between hiring, a professional company, if you're able to budget wise, versus someone who is there and needs a lot of training, and you're really kind of treating them as an employee rather than a contractor who comes in and says, this is how we do things.
So one thing I just wanted to back up with, because a lot of our entrepreneur community are new people, I just want to go over what your definition of fractional hire is, just so that we can throw it into the glossary and everybody knows what we're talking about, so nobody feels left behind.
Great point. Yes. So a fractional hire is essentially a contractor of any kind. So a contractor is someone who comes in, they have their own processes. They say to you, hey, this is how we do something. This is what I need from you. And I fill this specific gap in your business. That's a fractional hire. So right now, if you're a small one-person show, you might have a bookkeeper or you might have an accountant, right? That's a fractional hire in the same way. And if you brought on someone to do your social media or to help you with email marketing or to help you with graphics, like those are all fractional hires. So that's what I mean by saying a fractional hire, or interchangeably a contractor.
The other thing I think you touched on is the budget. I think that is something that's totally missed all the time. It's like, you need a VA, you need a setter. A lot of us don't have the budget for that up front.
Yeah.
Do you think it's more important to outsource sooner, even if the budget is tight, or to continue what you're doing and outsource when the budget is more forgiving?
It really goes back to your goals. How fast do you want to grow? Because some people, if you are someone who wants to scale very quickly and your eyes are just set on a specific goal or a specific number you want to hit, and you're not going to be able to hit that on your own doing things the way you have been, then making that larger upfront investment is probably worth it and going to pay off faster for you in the long run and actually allow you to hit your goals. On the flip side, if things are a little bit more malleable for you and being more profitable is more important in this moment, then making that investment is probably not the right move for you. I would always recommend to talk about that, though, with the person that you're looking to hire in whatever role that is, because it's important that your hire also knows, what is the goal for their work outside of just your goal with them and like, hey, I want your work to yield this amount. Like, what are the long-term relationships that we're trying to build here? Do we want to grow with them, or is this just a short-term hire? Do we have specific monetary goals, or is it, I want us to reach this many accounts on Instagram this month from the content you're creating? So all of these kind of play into that, especially when we are looking at clients who want to hire us. It's important to me as a business owner to stay ethical and to not have a client hire us who can't afford us, because I don't think that it's important enough to make a hire that puts you into debt. And I just think that it's a really sleazy tactic when someone says, oh, you need to hire me in order to hit your monetary goals. I don't think that that's right. And oddly enough, we see it early 2020s, like coaching era was a lot of that language used. And I think we've really moved beyond that. So I think it has to be a personal decision and deciding, what are your priorities with the money that you have from your business right now? Is it important to you to have a lot of money in the bank for maybe like building up for a big hire, or are you comfortable in reinvesting more immediately?
One thing that really stuck out to me about what you just said, just triggered so deeply, was the language people use. How can people avoid a bad hire? Like, we're talking the untrained, like, I don't want to use negative language about anybody. You know, the people who come through your DMs and sound really perfect and they're a great fit, but then like you get to work with them and it is not. What is some language or warning signs I guess people could look for?
People are really great at disguising themselves these days. So there's a lot. I think more than ever, there's a lot of bait and switch happening right now where people do go into your DMs and it can feel really icky for you as the person on the other end to be like, oh, I thought I was building this great relationship with this person and really they were just trying to sell me into something. And really at the end of the day, like, listen, we're all business owners and we're all trying to make a sale, but there's a really smart way to go about that and a way that just doesn't feel good to the other person. But in terms of making sure that you don't make a bad hire, I believe it really comes down to the questions you ask that person on your interview with them. Asking questions point blank, like, hey, what does your onboarding process look like? As a business owner, I get asked that very few times. And I find it very surprising myself because at 95 Media, we've done so much work to build out this great onboarding process because it's so incredibly important to our work. But many of the clients who decide to work with us don't really realize how important that is. So that would be a big question I would ask. And then getting into the nitty gritty of, what does that day-to-day process look like? What does my communication look like with you? How often can I expect an email or a Slack message or a meeting with you? Really understanding whatever it is important to you. For me, communication is very important. I feel kind of out of touch if I don't know what's going on. And that's just me being like a type A business owner and needing to know everything. And maybe that's different for you listening. I think honing in on what is important to you with this hire. What is your goal? And also making sure they have the tools that they need in their own toolbox to not need to be trained by you if that's something you don't want to do. Because if your goal is to save time and you want to hire someone who doesn't need training, then that would be a question that I'd recommend asking point blank on that interview with them and not shy away from that. Because a lot of times we shy away from big questions like that and then we get stuck in bad contracts and with people who aren't the right fit for us.
Moving forward in the lifetime of an entrepreneur, what if somebody has made a bad hire? What is a way to reset? Because I know for us, it was very hard to let our team member go because he became family, he was part of the community, he was part of the movement happening, and that was the difficult part, but it wasn't working for either of us.
That happens so often. I know I've gone through that too. I think the best route is to be transparent. Whether that person has been communicating with your community, maybe they were like a community manager in a Facebook group or something like that where people knew them, or they were client facing, which happens a lot for us, where, our team is client facing. They've been working with a client for X number of months. And then all of a sudden we have to tell the client like, hey, this person's moving on. I believe it's best to be truthful in a really professional way, not to say like, hey, this person wasn't doing their job well, but to say something more along the lines of they've chosen to move on, just so you're not going to feel anything on your side. I think it's very important to reassure the client, if that's the position you're in, that nothing's going to change for them and that you have internally a great pass off process to the next person who will be filling that role. Because I've gone through, and maybe you've experienced this too, where when we've done transitions, the client gets really nervous and they kind of tighten up and they're like, oh, wait, now I have to work with someone totally new. Like they don't even know me. Like I have to introduce them all over again. And if you, as the business owner, have your own processes in place and you have gone through this before, which you will more than once, you can put processes into your team where you create a great pass off. So for us, we have a lot of internal systems where we have all of the client information in one place. So the new person can go back through every single call notes from every meeting that's ever happened. They can go through all of the original onboarding documents. They can go through all of the past content that's been created, email communication, everything is in one place. And so I think when you are recovering from a bad hire, that transition is one of the most important pieces. And then just figuring out how can we fix the problems that occurred in the past with that previous hire and do better moving forward. Because to me, the most important thing is that the client never feels the impact of a bad hire. They never feel the impact of letting that person go. And that's just kind of like a pillar and like a value for me, is that white glove service for a client. Again, looking forward and saying, okay, how can we make sure that this person who's taking over the role doesn't make the same mistakes? I've also found that sharing with that new hire who's filling that position what went wrong with the previous hire is really helpful. It sets that new person up for success so that they don't repeat the past mistakes too.
And in terms of being a hire, because we do have some ladies in the community who are contractors, VAs, things of that nature, how do you make sure you're being hired into a good team?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't know if you ever can really make sure. I think, again, it goes back to asking the right questions. So a question might be like, what are your values around X, Y, and Z? Are you someone who is an ally to the LGBTQ community? Like whatever is important to you would be a question to ask. And again, I think we get hesitant, especially as women. We don't always ask those questions as directly as we maybe should. And maybe part of that is fear of the answer too. And so it comes back to what's important for you and making sure that you align also with the person who you're going to be reporting to. I've turned down clients before because the person I spoke to on the phone who would be our direct point of contact at the company completely did not jive with myself or the way that I run my business. And that was an immediate like, thank you, but no thank you. And so, making sure that you're clear on what are your values and then what do you look for in the person that you want to work with at the end of the day.
The only other question I really have is, obviously there's different phases in hiring. There's hiring a one-off contractor, there's hiring a company, there's hiring like a mass corporation that's out there. Where do you think people should start if they're looking to hire that first hire, get their toes wet in hiring, not necessarily just the service, but like, how do I do an interview? How do I bring on somebody? How do I see this? Who do you think you should start with, the one-off hire, like the contractor, or more like a traditional company who has an outsourced team and all the resources?
My opinion would be to start small if it's one of your first hires. Biggest reason being that you'll get more personal attention. And when you are making your first hire, it's important to feel like you can trust that person and that you are feeling seen and heard, because then that allows you to build a deeper relationship. And from my experience and the experience of a lot of our clients, when you go big, you become a small fish in a big pond, right? And so I always feel that it's probably more beneficial as a smaller business to be a big fish in a small pond and to be one of a handful of clients that gets more personalized attention rather than one of several hundred. Now, of course, that means that the smaller company that you're hiring has to have those processes in place in order to give you the attention you need, and that they're not taking on too many clients that they can't give you the attention that they're promising. But overall, I do feel that as a small business, it usually makes the most sense to hire from a smaller company.
What is one actionable takeaway that you think our community could take from this conversation? If they're going out today, they're inspired, they're going to make that hire, what is one thing they should do, prepare for, or get in place before they go make that hire?
The biggest takeaway, I think, is that at the end of the day, we all are hiring to save time. And so when you can determine what does it mean to save time to me and what is my time worth, I think that helps you gain a lot of clarity in who the right hire is for you. And do you want to train them? Is your time worth training them? Because maybe the answer is yes, or maybe it's no. And then you want to hire someone who doesn't need training. But getting clear on what is my time worth? What do I really need from this hire is going to set you up for a lot of success.
How can people reach out to you if they have more questions or follow-up comments or anything they'd like to connect with you over? Because we'll obviously put your links in the comments and all of that.
We have our own podcast too. It's called Stop Scrolling, Start Scaling. We share a lot of marketing tips over there if that's the avenue you're looking for more help in. Our website is 95media.co. I am most active on Instagram, so our handle is 90.5.media, all spelled out. But if you're looking for a free way to work with us, we do have a free course called Master Your Marketing, which teaches you how to create content that converts in under 30 minutes a day. It's such a great course. You can join us inside at masteryourmarketingcourse.co.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to our audience?
I just think that, hiring can be really scary in the beginning, but trust me, once you do it a few times, you realize what you're looking for and what you're not. And it's not that scary long term. You'll definitely get the handle of it. And just making your first great hire, the first person you bring on your team who just takes the load off of your shoulders, is so transformational for your business. And that hire will happen if it hasn't already. And it really makes you realize the true impact of outsourcing and the way that that can help you scale your business. So it's definitely worth it in the long run.
Very cool. My last and probably the most important question of this interview, are you a tea drinker or are you into coffee?
Oh, so I used to have a really bad coffee addiction. Like 4 cups a day, couldn't function without it. So I gave it up. I was like, this is too much. We're drawing the line in the sand. So I am now a tea drinker. I drink English breakfast tea with honey every morning, and that is my go-to drink.
Very cool. I will add that recipe book that we're building if you like.
Perfect. I love that.
Once again, this is Emma Tessler from 95 Media. We appreciate your time, and we hope you do come back soon. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.